when a black waitress calmly told 2 police officers that she was worth more than they'd see in 10 lifetimes. They laughed in her face, threw her against their patrol car, and called for backup to arrest her for fraud and impersonation. What those officers didn't know, what they couldn't have possibly known as they tightened the handcuffs around her wrists, was that this woman wasn't lying. She wasn't delusional, and she definitely wasn't someone they wanted to mess with, because the sister of a 3-star general doesn't bluff. And when you humiliate someone with that kind of family connection, you don't just lose your job, you lose everything. But let me take you back to where this all started, because this story isn't just about one terrible night outside a diner. It's about a lifetime of being underestimated, a family secret kept for protection, and 2 cops who let their assumptions destroy their careers in under 3 hours. Her name was Maya Richardson, and if you had passed her on the street, you probably wouldn't have looked twice. She was 34 years old, with kind eyes, natural hair usually pulled back in a simple bun, and the sort of smile that made customers feel like they were sitting in their grandmother's kitchen instead of a roadside diner. Maya had worked at Rose's Diner in a small town just outside Atlanta for the past 8 years, the kind of place with red vinyl booths, a jukebox that only played songs from the 70s, and a menu that hadn't changed since 1987. She wasn't just good at her job. She was exceptional. Regulars would request her section. Truckers passing through would remember her name and ask for her 6 months later when they came back through town. Children loved her because she'd sneak them extra whipped cream on their pancakes when their parents weren't looking. Maya had a gift for making people feel seen, for remembering the small details, how someone took their coffee, that another person was going through a divorce, that the elderly man in booth 7 had just lost his wife and needed someone to talk to. But here's what none of them knew. What Maya had deliberately hidden from everyone in this town except her closest friend, a woman named Denise who worked the morning shift. Maya was rich. Not doing okay rich. Not as some savings rich. We're talking generational wealth rich. Investment portfolio rich. Could buy this diner and ever building on this street rich. Her older brother, Marcus Richardson, was a 3-star general in the United States Army. He'd spent 28 years climbing the ranks, serving in 3 different conflicts, advising presidents, and becoming one of the most decorated black officers in military history. And when their parents died 12 years ago, their mother from cancer, their father from a heart attack just 6 months later, Marcus made sure Maya was taken care of. Not just taken care of, set for life. He'd put $12 million into a trust fund for her, with another $8 million in various investments that generated enough passive income that Maya could have lived in a mansion, driven luxury cars, and never worked another day in her life. So why was she slinging hash browns and refilling coffee cups in a small-town diner? Because this is where I'm happy, she told Denise once, late one night after closing when they were wiping down tables and Denise had finally worked up the courage to ask her about the designer purse she'd seen in Maya's car, the one that cost more than Denise made in 3 months. My brother's world is all about rank and protocol and people kissing up to you because of what you can do for them. This place, people are real hey. They don't want anything from me except their eggs over easy, and maybe a kind word. That's worth more than any mansion, Denise. Denise had hugged her then, understanding in a way that only a real friend could. They'd made a pact that night. Maya's secret would stay between them. No one else in this town needed to know. Maya liked being just Maya, the waitress with the warm smile and the patient air. Not Maya Richardson, sister of General Marcus Richardson. Not Maya the millionaire. Just Maya. But secrets have a way of exploding at the worst possible moment. And for Maya, that moment came on a Thursday night in late September. It started with Officer Derek Brennan and his partner, Officer Kyle Morrison. 2 local cops, both in their early 30s, both with the kind of swagger that comes from carrying a badge in a small town where nothing much happens and everyone knows your name. Brennan was the worst of the 2, shorter, stockier, with a shaved head and a permanent scowl that made him look like he was always 1 second away from writing someone a ticket. He'd been on the force for 9 years and had racked up 7 complaints for excessive force, though none of them had gone anywhere. Small-town politics protected their own, and Brennan knew it. He had a reputation for being tough on crime, which really meant he was tough on people he didn't like, which really meant he was tough on people who didn't look like him or show him enough respect. Morrison was newer, only 3 years on the job, taller and leaner with blonde hair and a face that still looked boyish. He wasn't as openly aggressive as Brennan, but he was weak in a different way. He went along with whatever his partner did, never speaking up, never questioning, always backing the play even when the play was clearly wrong. They'd come into Rose's diner that Thursday around 9 p.m., right in the middle of Maya's shift. The dinner rush was over, and there were only a handful of customers left, an elderly couple in the corner, a truck driver at the counter, and a young woman working on her laptop in booth 4. Maya had served them before. They always ordered the same thing, burgers, fries, black coffee, and they always left terrible tips. But that wasn't what bothered her. What bothered her was the way Brennan looked at her, like she was something he'd stepped in, like serving him was the most she could ever aspire to in life. Well, well, Brennan said as Maya approached their table with a notepad. Look who it is. Our favorite waitress. How you doing tonight, Maya? The way he said her name made her skin crawl. Too familiar. Too possessive. Like he owned her just because he knew what to call her. I'm doing fine, officer, Maya said, keeping her voice level and professional. What can I get for you gentlemen tonight? Same as always, Morrison said, barely looking up from his phone. Actually, Brennan said, leaning back in the booth and eyeing her up and down in a way that made Maya's stomach turn. I've been wondering something. How long you been working here now? 8 years. 9. 8 years, Maya confirmed, writing down their order even though she had it memorized. 8 years. Brennan whistled low. Slinging coffee and pancakes for 8 years. Don't you ever want more out of life? I mean, no offense, but this ain't exactly a career, is it? Maya's hand tightened around her pen, but she kept her expression neutral. I like my job just fine. Yeah, but come on. Brennan glanced at Morrison, who smiked on cue. You gotta have dreams, right? Things you want to do. Places you want to see. Or is this it for you? There it was. That familiar condescension she'd dealt with her entire life. The assumption that because she was serving them food, because she wore an apron and orthopedic shoes, because she didn't drive a Mercedes or wear expensive jewelry to work, she must be less than. Must be trapped. Must be desperate for a way out. Maya could have told him the truth right then. Could have mentioned that she'd traveled to 19 different countries. Could have casually noted that her investment portfolio had grown by $400,000 just this year. Could have explained that she owned a house outright, had no debt, and gave more money to charity annually than he made in salary. But she didn't. Because men like Brennan didn't deserve her truth. And because explaining yourself to people who've already decided what you're worth is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. Pointless and exhausting. I'll get your order in, she said instead, and walked away. Behind her, she heard Morrison laugh. Man, you really rattle her. These people need to know their place, Brennan said, loud enough that Maya could still hear him as she pushed through the kitchen doors. Get comfortable with what they are. Stop reaching for shit that ain't meant for them. In the kitchen, Maya stood at the order window and took 3 deep breaths. Her hands weren't shaking. They never shook. She dealt with men like Brennan her whole life. In college, in previous jobs, on the street, in stores. She'd learned a long time ago that the best response to small-minded people was to simply be excellent at what you did, to carry yourself with dignity, and to remember that their opinions said everything about them and nothing about you. You good? Called Tony, the line cook, a 60-year-old Puerto Rican man who'd worked at Rose's for 23 years. I'm good, Maya said, and she meant it. She delivered their food 20 minutes later without additional comment. They ate, made a few more condescending remarks that she ignored, and eventually left, with a $2 tip on a $35 check, because of course they did. Maya thought that was the end of it. She thought she'd never have to think about Officers Brennan and Morrison again beyond the occasional unpleasant encounter when they stopped by for their mediocre burgers and their terrible attitudes. She was wrong. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday night in mid-October, Maya was driving home from her shift around midnight. The diner had been busy. A high school football game had just ended, and half the town had flooded in for milkshakes and fries, and she was tired in that good way that comes from a job well done and pockets full of decent tips that she'd give to Denise tomorrow because Denise was a single mom with 3 kids and could use it more than Maya ever would. She was driving her car, a modest 8-year-old Honda Civic that she'd bought used and maintained perfectly, when she noticed the flashing lights behind her. Her heart sank. She hadn't been speeding. Her registration was current. Her taillight wasn't out. There was no reason for a cop to pull her over except maybe a random check, which happened sometimes in small towns where officers had nothing better to do. She pulled over onto the shoulder, turned off the engine, rolled down her window, and put both hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen. These were the rules. The rules her brother had drilled into her head from the time she was 16 years old and got her license. The rules that every black person in America learned not from a textbook but from necessity, from survival, from watching the news and seeing what happened to people who reached for their wallet too fast or talked back too much or simply existed in a way that made an officer nervous. License and registration. Came the voice from behind her flashlight. Maya recognized that voice immediately. Officer Derek Brennan. Her stomach tightened, but she kept her face calm. Yes, officer. My license is in my purse on the passenger seat. My registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now. Go ahead. She moved slowly, deliberately, narrating each action. I'm opening my purse now. I'm getting my wallet. Here's my license. She handed it through the window. Now I'm reaching for the glove compartment. Opening it. Getting the registration. Brennan took both documents and shined his flashlight on them, then on her face, then around the interior of her car. Morrison stood a few feet back, hand resting on his service weapon, silent as always. Step out of the vehicle, Brennan said. Maya's heart rate increased, but her voice stayed steady. Can I ask why you pulled me over, officer? Step out of the vehicle, he repeated, harder this time. She knew better than to argue. She unbuckled a seatbelt and opened the door, stepping out onto the shoulder of the dark road. A truck whooshed past, too close, and she instinctively stepped back. Turn around. Hands on the vehicle. Officer Brennan, I don't understand what. Did I ask you a question? Turn around and put your hands on the vehicle. Maya turned around and placed her palms flat on the hood of her Civic. This was wrong. This was so obviously, clearly wrong. She hadn't committed any traffic violation. He had no probable cause to search her. But she also knew that being right didn't protect you. Being right didn't stop you from getting hurt, or arrested, or worse. Brennan patted her down roughly, his hands lingering in ways that felt less like a search and more like a violation. Maya closed her eyes and focused on breathing. In through her nose, out through her mouth. This would be over soon. She'd file a complaint. She'd call her brother. This would be handled. Well, Brennan said, pulling out her phone from her back pocket. What do we have here? Nice phone. Looks expensive. How's a diner waitress afford an iPhone 15 Pro Max? I saved up for it, Maya said quietly, which was technically true, even if the amount she'd had to save was approximately 1 week's worth of passive income from her investments. Saved up, Brennan repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He walked back to Morrison, and Maya could hear them talking in low voices. Then Brennan called out, Hey Maya, come here for a second. She turned around and walked toward them, keeping her hands visible at her sides. So here's the thing, Brennan said, crossing his arms. I ran your license, and everything checks out, which is great. But I'm curious about something. You've been working at that diner for 8 years, making what? Minimum wage plus tips? Maybe $30,000 a year if you're lucky. I do fine, Maya said. I bet you do. But then I see you with this expensive phone, and it makes me wonder. See, we've been having some issues in this town lately with people committing fraud, identity theft, credit card scams, that kind of thing. And I gotta tell you, when I see someone who works a minimum wage job driving around past midnight with expensive electronics, it raises some red flags. Maya felt ice spread through her chest. Are you accusing me of something, officer? I'm just asking questions. See, that's my job. To ask questions when things don't add up. My phone is paid for. I bought it legitimately. I'm not committing fraud. Then you won't mind if we search your car, right? I mean, if you've got nothing to hide. This was it. The moment. Maya could refuse. She had rights. The Fourth Amendment protected her from unreasonable search and seizure. But she also knew how this ended. She'd refuse. He'd claim he smelled marijuana or saw something suspicious. He'd search anyway. And then she'd be arrested for obstruction on top of whatever else he decided to make up. Or she could consent, let him search, find nothing, and go home. Except Maya had learned something from watching her brother navigate military politics for nearly 3 decades. When someone has already decided you're guilty, proving your innocence only makes them dig harder. I don't consent to a search, Maya said clearly. I haven't committed any crime. I'd like to leave now. Brennan's face hardened. You're refusing to cooperate. I'm exercising my constitutional rights, officer. Morrison, Brennan called out. You smell that? Morrison, who had been silent this entire time, hesitated for just a second. Maya saw it, that tiny moment where his conscience almost spoke up, where he almost did the right thing. But then he opened his mouth and said, Yeah, I smell marijuana. It was a lie. A blatant, obvious, shameless lie. Maya didn't smoke. She'd never smoked marijuana in her entire life. There was nothing in her car except her work uniform, her purse, some reusable shopping bags in the back seat, and a bottle of water. That's not true, Maya said, her voice still calm but with an edge of steel now. You're lying. Are you calling a police officer a liar? Brennan stepped closer, invading her personal space. Because that sounds like you're obstructing an investigation. I'm stating a fact. There's no marijuana in my vehicle. Well, we're gonna check. Morrison, call for another unit. We're gonna need to do a full search. This was escalating in exactly the way Maya had feared. She could feel it spiraling out of control, could see the ending before it happened. And that's when she made the decision that would change everything. Before you do that, Maya said, her voice dropping lower but somehow more commanding, I think you should know something. I'm not who you think I am. Brennan laughed. Actually laughed. Oh yeah. Who are you then? Beyonce. My brother is General Marcus Richardson, 3-star General, United States Army, and I'm worth approximately $20 million. So before you search my car based on a fake probable cause, before you continue to harass me and violate my rights, maybe you want to reconsider what you're doing here. The words hung in the air between them. Morrison's face went pale. Even in the darkness, lit only by the flashing red and blue lights of their patrol car, Maya could see the blood drain from his face. Because Morrison, unlike Brennan, was smart enough to recognize that name. Smart enough to realize they might have just made a catastrophic mistake. But Brennan just laughed harder. A general's sister, he said, wiping his eyes. Did you hear that, Morrison? We got ourselves a general's sister. And she's a billionaire, too. $20 million. He stepped even closer to Maya, so close she could smell the coffee on his breath. You know what I think? I think you're delusional. I think you're exactly what you look like, a broke waitress with delusions of grandeur. And you know what else? I think lying to a police officer, pretending to be someone you're not, that's fraud. That's impersonation. And I'm gonna enjoy arresting you for it. Brennan, Morrison started, his voice uncertain. Shut up, Morrison. Turn around, he barked at Maya. Hands behind your back. You're making a mistake, Maya said quietly. The only mistake here is you thinking you can play games with me. Turn around. Now. Maya took a deep breath. She'd given him a chance. She'd given him an out. She tried to de-escalate this situation before it went too far. But Officer Derek Brennan, in his arrogance and his prejudice and his absolute certainty that he knew who Maya was based on nothing more than the color of her skin and the apron she wore to work, had made his choice. She turned around. The cold metal of handcuffs clicked around her wrists. You have the right to remain silent, Brennan began, and Maya closed her eyes as he recited her Miranda rights, as Morrison radioed for backup, as her life, her quiet, peaceful, deliberately simple life, shattered into 1,000 pieces on the side of a dark road in small-town Georgia. But here's what neither of those officers understood in that moment. Maya Richardson wasn't just some waitress they could push around and humiliate and arrest on fake charges. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't friendless. And she definitely wasn't someone who would let this injustice stand. Because while Brennan was congratulating himself on what he thought was a good arrest, while Morrison was swallowing his doubts and going along with it like he always did, while they were both imagining how this story would sound at the station. You won't believe what this crazy waitress tried to pull. Maya was doing something they would never have expected. She was staying completely, perfectly calm. Because she knew something they didn't. The storm was coming, and when it hit, it would destroy them both. They took Maya to the county jail, processed her, put her in a holding cell, and charged her with fraud, false impersonation, and obstruction of justice. The bail was set at $50,000, an amount designed to keep someone like a poor waitress locked up, unable to afford a bail bondsman, forced to wait in jail for a court date that might be weeks or months away. Maya made her one phone call. Not to a bail bondsman, not to a lawyer, to her brother. "Marcus," she said when he answered, his voice groggy from sleep. It was nearly 2 a.m, and he was at Fort Benning, about 2 hours south. "I need you." 10 seconds. That's all it took for her to explain what happened, who arrested her, what they charged her with, where she was. And Marcus Richardson, the general who had stared down enemy combatants and terrorist leaders and hostile foreign officials without flinching, who had earned his 3 stars through 28 years of uncompromising service and strategic brilliance, said 6 words that would set everything in motion. "Do not say another word. I'm coming." He hung up, and then he made phone calls of his own. First, to the best criminal defense attorney in the state of Georgia, a woman named Patricia Chen who had made a career destroying false prosecutions and suing police departments for civil rights violations. She was in her car and driving toward the county jail within 15 minutes. Second, to his own attorney, a man who specialized in military law and had connections throughout the Department of Defense, the FBI, and the Department of Justice. Third, to a friend at the FBI's Atlanta field office, because if local cops were making false arrests and violating civil rights, that was a federal matter. Fourth, to a journalist he knew at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a woman who had won a Pulitzer Prize for her investigation into police misconduct. "I've got a story for you," he said, "and you're going to want to move fast on this one." And fifth, he called the county sheriff directly, because Marcus Richardson hadn't become a 3-star general by not knowing how power worked. He knew exactly who to call, exactly what to say, and exactly how much pressure to apply. "This is General Marcus Richardson, United States Army," he said when the sheriff, a man named William Porter, answered his personal cell phone at 2:30 a.m. "My sister was arrested tonight by 2 of your officers on fabricated charges. She's currently being held in your jail on fraudulent allegations. I'm going to make this very simple for you, Sheriff Porter. You can handle this now, or you can handle it tomorrow when the FBI and the Department of Justice show up with civil rights investigators and the national media turns this into the biggest scandal your department has ever seen. Your choice. You have 30 seconds to decide." Sheriff Porter, to his credit, was smart enough to recognize a political nuclear bomb when it was handed to him. "General Richardson, let me call you back in 5 minutes. I need to review the arrest report." "You have 5 minutes," Marcus said, and hung up. Meanwhile, at the county jail, Maya sat in her holding cell with 3 other women, one arrested for shoplifting, one for DUI, one for possession of methamphetamine. They'd all looked at her curiously when she'd been brought in. This composed woman in a diner uniform who didn't cry, didn't complain, didn't even seem particularly worried. "What are you in for?" asked the woman arrested for shoplifting, a thin blonde in her early 20s with hollow eyes and shaking hands. "Being black while driving," Maya said quietly. The woman nodded like that made perfect sense. Because it did. Because they all knew how this worked. They sat in silence for another 20 minutes. Then a guard appeared. "Richardson, you're out." The other women stared. It had barely been an hour since Maya was processed. "Bail posted?" Maya asked, standing up. "No bail. Charges dropped. Let's go." Maya followed the guard down the hallway, through 2 locked doors, to the processing area where her belongings were returned to her. Her phone, her wallet, her keys. No explanation, no apology, just a deputy avoiding her eyes as he slid her property across the counter and mumbled, "You're free to go." In the waiting area, Maya found Patricia Chen, a petite Chinese-American woman in her 40s wearing a perfectly tailored suit despite the 3 a.m. hour, and Marcus. Her brother looked like he'd been carved from stone, 6'3", broad-shouldered, his uniform still crisp even though he'd clearly dressed in a hurry. The 3 stars on his shoulder gleamed under the fluorescent lights. His face was calm, but Maya knew that face. She knew the rage burning underneath that calm. She'd seen it only a handful of times in her life, and every single time, someone had regretted making Marcus Richardson angry. He didn't say anything. He just opened his arms, and Maya walked into them, finally letting herself feel the fear and humiliation and anger she'd been holding back for the past 2 hours. "I've got you," Marcus said quietly. "I've got you, Maya. And I promise you, they will regret this." By 6 a.m., Sheriff Porter was sitting in his office with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched, reviewing the dashboard camera footage from Brennan and Morrison's patrol car. What he saw made him sick. The entire stop was there. Every word, every action. And it was so much worse than he'd feared. There was no traffic violation that justified the stop. Brennan had pulled Maya over for no legal reason. The dashcam showed her car traveling exactly the speed limit, staying in her lane. No equipment violations visible. It was a pretextual stop, pure and simple. The search was completely unjustified. Brennan's claim that he smelled marijuana was an obvious lie. You could see Morrison hesitate before backing him up, see the moment he chose loyalty to his partner over truth. And the arrest, that was the worst part, because you could hear Maya's voice on that recording, clear and calm, telling them exactly who she was. You could hear Brennan laughing at her, mocking her, calling her delusional, arresting her not because she'd committed any crime, but because she dared to claim she was something other than what he decided she was. Sheriff Porter had been in law enforcement for 31 years. He'd seen bad cops before. He'd dealt with excessive force complaints, racial profiling accusations, all of it. But this was different. This was so blatant, so obviously motivated by prejudice and ego, that there was no way to spin it, no way to defend it. And the fact that it had happened to the sister of a 3-star general, a woman who actually was exactly who she said she was, who could prove every single word. They were finished. Brennan and Morrison were finished. And if Porter didn't handle this perfectly, his entire department would be finished too. He picked up his phone and called his chief deputy. "Get Brennan and Morrison in here. Right now. I don't care if they're sleeping. Get them in here." 4 to 5 minutes later, both officers sat in his office. Brennan still looked confident, almost smug. Morrison looked like he was about to vomit. "Tell me about the Richardson arrest," Porter said, his voice dangerously quiet. Brennan shrugged. Traffic stop turned into a probable cause search. Subject became belligerent, started making wild claims about being rich and connected. Classic signs of fraud or delusion. We arrested her for false impersonation and obstruction. "And did it occur to you to verify her claims before arresting her?" "Sheriff, she's a diner waitress. She was obviously lying." Porter slowly turned his computer monitor so both officers could see it. On the screen was a photo of General Marcus Richardson in his dress uniform, standing next to the President of the United States at a ceremony where he'd received the Distinguished Service Medal. Next to that was another photo, Marcus and Maya at what looked like a family gathering, both smiling at the camera. The color drained from Brennan's face. "That's Maya Richardson," Porter said. "Sister of General Marcus Richardson. And before you ask, yes, I've verified that she has a trust fund worth approximately $12 million and additional investments worth another $8 million. Everything she told you was true. Every single word." Morrison put his head in his hands. Brennan just stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. "You arrested a $20 million woman on false charges," Porter continued. "You pulled her over without cause. You conducted an illegal search based on a lie. You mocked her when she told you the truth. And you did all of this on camera." He leaned forward. "Give me one reason, one single reason, why I shouldn't fire both of you right now and refer this case to the FBI for civil rights violations." "Sheriff," Brennan started. "I'm not finished. Do you have any idea what you've done? The FBI is reviewing this case as we speak. The Department of Justice has been notified. We have attorneys from Atlanta calling me, asking for copies of all your personnel files, every complaint that's ever been filed against you, every disciplinary action. This is going to be national news by tomorrow morning. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, every network is going to run this story, and our department is going to look like a racist, incompetent joke because you two couldn't set aside your prejudices for 5 seconds and see a human being instead of a stereotype." "It was an honest mistake," Brennan said weakly. "An honest mistake." Porter's voice rose for the first time. An honest mistake is getting someone's name wrong. An honest mistake is writing the wrong date on a report. Arresting someone for fraud because you don't believe a black woman can have money? That's not a mistake, Brennan. That's bigotry. That's corruption. And it ends here. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out 2 envelopes. You're both suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending a formal investigation. You'll surrender your badges, your weapons, and your credentials right now. And I suggest you both get attorneys, because Ms. Richardson's legal team has made it very clear that they will be pursuing both criminal and civil action against you personally. You can't do this, Brennan said, standing up. I've been on this force for 9 years. I've got seniority. You've got 7 excessive force complaints, 12 citizen complaints about rudeness and profiling, and now a federal civil rights investigation. Sit down and shut up, Brennan. The only reason I'm not firing you on the spot is because I have to follow procedure. But trust me, you're done. Both of you. Morrison, who still hadn't looked up, said quietly, I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me, Porter said. Apologize to Maya Richardson, though I doubt it'll help. You had a chance to do the right thing last night. You had a chance to stop your partner when you knew he was lying about smelling marijuana. But you backed him up anyway. You chose wrong, Morrison, and now you get to live with that choice. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. General Sister arrested on false charges read the headline in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Below it was a photo of Maya in her diner uniform next to a photo of Marcus in his military dress uniform, and a third photo showing Brennan and Morrison in their police gear. By noon, it had been picked up by every major news outlet in the country. By evening, as Justice for Maya was trending on Twitter. By the next morning, there were protesters outside the county sheriff's office demanding the firing of both officers and a full investigation into the department's practices. The body camera footage was released. Patricia Chen had petitioned the court, and given the public interest and the clear evidence of wrongdoing, a judge had ordered it unsealed. Within hours, millions of people had watched it, had heard Brennan's condescending tone, had watched Maya stay calm and dignified even as she was handcuffed and arrested, had heard her voice when she said, "You're making a mistake." The public reaction was swift and brutal. The sheriff's office was flooded with calls demanding justice. The mayor held a press conference promising a full investigation. The FBI opened a formal civil rights inquiry. The Department of Justice sent a team to review the police department's training protocols and complaint history. But the real damage happened in the court of public opinion. Because what made this story so powerful, what made it cut through the noise of 1,000 other stories about police misconduct, was the stark, undeniable contrast between who Maya actually was and what those officers had assumed she must be. She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't even someone struggling to get by. She was a woman of extraordinary means who had chosen, out of genuine love for the work and the people, to serve others. She was the embodiment of the American success story, generational wealth, family honor, and personal humility all wrapped up in one person. And 2 cops had treated her like garbage because they couldn't see past their own biases. On CNN, a commentator said, "This is what systemic prejudice looks like. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how connected your family is, or how law-abiding you are. If you don't fit someone's narrow idea of what success is supposed to look like, you will be targeted, harassed, and disrespected." On Fox News, even the conservative hosts were outraged. These officers made law enforcement look terrible. This woman told them who she was, and they laughed in her face. Where's the professionalism? Where's the basic human decency? Social media was even more direct. The comments on the video of Maya's arrest were scathing. Imagine being so blinded by racism that you arrest a millionaire and think she's committing fraud for saying she's a millionaire. She handled this with more grace than I ever could. The way she stayed calm, the way she spoke clearly and respectfully even while being handcuffed, that takes incredible strength. Those cops saw a black woman in a work uniform and decided they knew everything about her. They couldn't even imagine she might be telling the truth. That's the problem right there. I hope she sues them for everything they have. They deserve it. And sue them she did. Patricia Chen filed both criminal complaints and a massive civil lawsuit against Brennan, Morrison, and the police department. The suit alleged false arrest, unlawful detention, violation of civil rights, assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and defamation. The damages sought, $25 million. My client was humiliated, traumatized, and violated by officers who abused their power. Continue 16:45 Patricia said at a press conference, Maya standing beside her in a simple black dress, her hair down, her eyes clear and steady. She was targeted because of the color of her skin and her occupation. These officers made assumptions based on prejudice, not evidence. And when she told them the truth, when she tried to de-escalate the situation by explaining exactly who she was, they mocked her. They called her delusional. They arrested her for the crime of not fitting into their narrow worldview. A reporter called out, Ms. Richardson, why did you keep your wealth a secret? Why work as a waitress if you didn't need the money? Maya stepped forward to the microphone. This was the first time she'd spoken publicly since the arrest. The room fell silent. I worked at Rose's Diner because I loved it, she said simply. I loved the people. I loved the work. I loved feeling like I was part of a community where people saw me for who I am, not for who my brother is or how much money I have. I didn't keep my wealth a secret because I was ashamed of it. I kept it private because I wanted to be treated like a normal person. I wanted genuine relationships. I wanted to serve people without them feeling like they needed to treat me differently. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But what happened that night showed me something important. It showed me that no matter what I do, no matter how kind I am or how hard I work or how much I contribute to my community, there will always be people who look at me and see only my skin color, who decide, based on nothing but their own prejudices, that I can't possibly be anything more than what they've decided I am. Her voice got stronger. Those officers didn't pull me over because I committed a crime. They pulled me over because they could, because they saw a black woman driving alone at night, and they decided to flex their power. And when I dared to tell them that I was someone they should respect, when I dared to claim dignity and worth, they punished me for it. They arrested me for the crime of refusing to accept their assessment of my value. The room was absolutely silent now. I'm not just suing for myself, Maya continued. I'm suing for every person who's been pulled over for no reason, every person who's been searched illegally, every person who's been arrested on false charges, every person who's been mocked and disrespected and brutalized by officers who forgot that their job is to serve and protect all people, not just the ones they deem worthy. This ends now. Not just for me. For everyone. The applause was deafening. The investigation moved quickly. Within 2 weeks, both Brennan and Morrison were formally fired from the police department. The review board found that Brennan had violated department policy on 14 separate counts, including illegal search and seizure, false arrest, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Morrison was found to have violated 6 policies, primarily for failing to intervene when his partner was clearly breaking the law. But the criminal charges were what really mattered. The FBI's Civil Rights Division brought federal charges against both officers under Title 18, U.S.C. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. If convicted, they faced up to 10 years in prison. The trial became a national spectacle. Court TV broadcast it live. Legal analysts dissected every moment. The jury was sequestered to avoid the intense media coverage. Maya testified for 3 hours. She walked through every detail of that night, what she'd said, how the officers had responded, the fear she'd felt even while staying calm, the humiliation of being handcuffed and processed and put in a cell like a criminal when she'd done nothing wrong. I gave them a chance to back down, she said from the witness stand. I told them who I was, not to threaten them or to pull rank, but to help them understand they were making a mistake. I was trying to save them from this exact situation. But Officer Brennan didn't care about the truth. He cared about being right, about maintaining his authority. And so he arrested me, not because I committed a crime, but because I challenged his assumptions about who I was allowed to be. The defense attorneys tried to paint Maya as someone who had escalated the situation by claiming to be wealthy, suggesting that she'd brought this on herself by not being more cooperative, more submissive. Patricia Chen destroyed that argument in her cross-examination of Brennan. Officer Brennan, you stated in your report that Ms. Richardson was belligerent and uncooperative. Can you define belligerent for the jury? Hostile. Aggressive. And Ms. Richardson was hostile and aggressive how, exactly? She refused to consent to a search of her vehicle. Is refusing a search belligerent, in your opinion? When someone has something to hide, yes. But Ms. Richardson had nothing to hide, did she? Your search found nothing illegal in her vehicle. Correct? Correct. So a person exercising their Fourth Amendment rights, their constitutional rights, is being belligerent. Brennan shifted in his seat. She was uncooperative. She provided her license and registration immediately, didn't she? Yes. She kept her hands visible and followed your instructions, didn't she? Yes, but... She calmly explained who she was, didn't she? She lied. She told you the truth, Officer Brennan. She told you she was the sister of a three-star general, and that she was worth $20 million. That was completely true. You just didn't believe her. Isn't that right? I had reason to be skeptical. What reason? What evidence did you have that she was lying? Brennan's jaw clenched. She's a waitress. She drives a Honda. She doesn't look like someone who has money. That's what you were going to say, wasn't it? That's not. Officer Brennan, isn't it true that you made a judgment about Ms. Richardson's wealth and status based entirely on her appearance, her occupation, and her race? No. Then explain to this jury why you pulled her over in the first place. What traffic violation did she commit? Silence. Officer Brennan, what traffic violation did Ms. Richardson commit that justified the stop? I observed a vehicle and believed. You believed what? That a black woman driving a modest car late at night must be up to something. Is that your professional opinion? Objection, the defense attorney shouted. But the damage was done. The jury had seen Brennan squirm. They'd watched him try to justify the unjustifiable. They'd heard him essentially admit that he'd profiled Maya based on nothing but his own prejudice. The verdict came back after just 4 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Brennan was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Morrison, who cooperated with investigators and showed genuine remorse, got 3 years. The civil suit was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, but legal analysts estimated it was well north of $15 million. The Sheriff's Department was also required to implement comprehensive reforms, new training on implicit bias, mandatory body cameras for all officers, an independent review board for excessive force complaints, and a complete overhaul of their internal affairs process. Maya stood in front of a brand new building on the same street as Rose's Diner. The sign above the door read Richardson Community Center. It had taken 6 months, but she'd done it. She'd taken a portion of the settlement money and created something that would last long after the news cameras moved on to the next story. A place where young people in this town could come after school for tutoring, mentorship, job training, and legal assistance. A place where people could learn about their rights, where they could get help if they were ever treated unfairly by law enforcement or any other authority figure. The center offered free legal clinics twice a week, staffed by volunteer attorneys from Atlanta. It had a computer lab, a library, a youth counseling program, and a scholarship fund for local students who wanted to go to college but couldn't afford it. Denise was the director. She'd quit the diner to run the center full-time, and she was spectacular at it. Organized, compassionate, and deeply connected to the community in a way that made people trust the place immediately. We're going to change lives here, Denise said, standing next to Maya at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Because of you. Because you didn't let them break you. Because WE didn't let them break us, Maya corrected. This isn't about me, Denise. It's about making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. Or if it does, they have somewhere to go. Someone to help them. The center opened to a crowd of over 200 people, former customers from the diner, students from the local high school, activists who'd followed Maya's story, and reporters who wanted to document this next chapter. Marcus was there too, in civilian clothes for once, standing in the back with a quiet pride on his face. He'd wanted to make a speech, but Maya had asked him not to. Let this be about the community, she'd said. Not about generals or money or fame. Let it be about people helping people. So Marcus stood in the back and watched his little sister cut the ribbon, watched her greet every single person who came through the door, watched her explain the programs and services with that same warmth and genuine care that had made her such a beloved waitress. As for Maya's work at the diner, she still went in 3 times a week. Not because she needed the money. The settlement had grown her already substantial wealth even more, but because she'd been telling the truth all along. She really did love it. She loved Tony's terrible jokes in the kitchen. She loved the regular customers who'd supported her through the trial. She loved the simple satisfaction of a job well done and a customer who left smiling. Rosie, the 82-year-old owner of the diner, had cried when Maya came back for her first shift after the trial. "You could buy this place 100 times over," Rosie had said. "Why are you still here?" Maya had hugged her. "Because this is home, Rosie. Money doesn't change that." But something had changed in Maya. Not in a bad way. She was still kind, still patient, still warm with everyone she met. But there was a steel underneath now that hadn't been there before. A clarity, a willingness to speak up not just for herself, but for anyone who was being treated unfairly. She'd started giving talks at churches, community centers, and colleges about civil rights, about knowing your rights during police encounters, about the importance of dignity and self-worth in the face of prejudice. "They wanted me to be small," she'd say in these talks. "They wanted me to accept their assessment of who I was and what I was worth. And the truth is, that's what prejudice always wants. It wants you to shrink, to doubt yourself, to believe the lies people tell about you. But I'm here to tell you something important. You are not what small-minded people say you are. You are not defined by their limitations, their fears, their prejudices. You are who you know yourself to be. And no one has the right to take that from you. Here's what I need you to understand, and I'm talking directly to you now. Whoever's watching this, Maya's story isn't unique because of who her brother was or how much money she had. Those things mattered in terms of getting justice, sure. But the core of this story, the part that should make your blood boil and your heart ache, is that she shouldn't have needed a powerful brother or millions of dollars to be treated with basic human decency. She should have been able to drive home from work without being harassed. She should have been able to say, "I don't consent to a search," without being arrested. She should have been able to exist in the world as a black woman working an honest job without 2 cops deciding she must be up to something because she didn't fit their narrow definition of what success looks like. And that's the real problem, isn't it? We live in a world where your worth is often determined not by who you actually are, but by who people assume you are based on how you look, what you do for work, what car you drive, what neighborhood you live in. Maya worked as a waitress because she wanted to, because it brought her joy and purpose. But to Brennan and Morrison, that job made her less than, made her someone who could be disrespected, violated, arrested on false charges. They literally could not imagine that a black woman in an apron might be worth more than they'd see in a lifetime. And when she told them the truth, when she tried to give them a chance to reconsider, they didn't see it as information. They saw it as disrespect, as a challenge to the order they believed in, where they had power and people like Maya didn't. That's what prejudice does. It blinds you to reality. It makes you so confident in your assumptions that you'll destroy your own life rather than admit you might be wrong about someone. Brennan is in prison now. Morrison is in prison now. Their careers are over. Their reputations are destroyed. All because they couldn't see past their own biases for 5 minutes. All because they valued their ego more than the truth. But here's the thing that gives me hope in this story. Maya didn't let them make her bitter. She could have taken her settlement money and disappeared. She could have moved to another state, surrounded herself with wealth and security, and never looked back at the town that failed to protect her. Instead, she built something that would help others. She stayed in her community. She continued doing work she loved. She turned her pain into purpose and her trauma into transformation. That's not weakness. That's not naivety. That's strength of a kind most people will never possess. So if you take anything from this story, take this: the world will judge you. People will make assumptions about who you are based on nothing but superficial details. And some of those people will have power, badges, money, authority, platforms, followers, whatever. But their assumptions don't define you. Their prejudices don't limit you. And their abuse of power doesn't have to break you. You have rights. You have worth. You have dignity. And you have the power to turn injustice into something meaningful, to take the pain people cause you and transform it into protection for others. Maya Richardson is worth $20 million, But that's not why her story matters. Her story matters because she stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent, because she fought back when it would have been safer to accept injustice, and because she chose to build rather than destroy, to heal rather than hate, to serve rather than retreat. That's the person we should all aspire to be. Not rich, not connected, not powerful in the traditional sense, but unbreakable in our sense of self, unwavering in our commitment to justice, and generous enough to help others even after we've been hurt ourselves. If this story moved you, if it made you think about how you treat people, how you make assumptions, how you use whatever power you have in this world, then share it. Talk about it. Let it change you. And if you've ever been treated the way Maya was treated, if you've ever been profiled or judged or dismissed because of how you look or what you do or where you're from, know this: you're not alone. Your experience matters. Your truth matters. And there are people fighting every day to make sure what happened to Maya becomes harder and harder for bad cops and prejudiced people to get away with. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people who fought back against injustice and won. And drop a comment telling me, what would you have done in Maya's situation? How do you think we fix systems that allow this kind of abuse to happen? Because this isn't just Maya's story. It's all of our story. And the only way it gets better is if we all refuse to stay silent when we see injustice, refuse to make assumptions about people we don't know, and refuse to let prejudice, our own or anyone else's, go unchallenged. Maya Richardson is still serving people at Rose's Diner 3 days a week. She's still running her community center. She's still living her life with grace and purpose and an unshakable belief that people are better than their worst moments and that change is possible when good people refuse to give up. Be like Maya. Not rich, not connected, just brave enough to be yourself and strong enough to fight for what's right, even when it costs you something. That's the lesson. That's the story. And that's why it matters. Thanks for watching. Now go out there and make sure the Mayas of the world don't have to fight these battles alone.